All right, welcome everybody listening from all around the world, all around this beautiful blue-green planet we call Gaia. Welcome everybody here in Australia, this beautiful country of ours. Welcome to the Mystic Drop, where each week we try and journey down the road less traveled by, as the great Robert Frost once poetically put. I'm your host, Roberto Roya. Joining me today is Senator Malcolm Roberts. Malcolm is a family man and has had a background in engineering, mining, business leadership, and has a keen interest in economics and climate change data and facts. He is an Australian politician for Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party and is an elected senator for Queensland. I'd like to give a very warm welcome to you, Senator. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Robbie. It's a pleasure to be here. Just one correction.
Yes.
I'm not a senator for One Nation. I'm a senator for Queensland with One Nation. I'm very proud to be with One Nation, but I'm actually a senator for Queensland.
For Queensland.
I represent Queenslanders, yeah.
Thanks for fixing that up. Yes, so before we get started, we've got a Mystic Drop incantation that we like to share with our first-time guests, and it goes like this. We are two cosmic spiritual beings sitting around the campfire. Two drops of light from the Great Spirit. Truth is our path, and wisdom is our teacher. We start with a salute, and now let our magic flow. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, Malcolm.
Oh, thank you for having me, Robbie. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, no worries. I'd like to jump in straight into the deep end because I know your time is precious. A few weeks ago, I watched a video on Facebook, and this was actually the first time I discovered who you were. And firstly, I'd like to, congratulate you on standing up for not only the freedoms of Australians, but also the freedom of humanity in all around the world. That speech that you did was really hit my heart, and I think it hit a lot of hearts of Australians all around. And secondly, Senator, in your opinion, how did we get to this point where our freedoms are being, ripped away on a daily basis, in your opinion?
Can I be blunt with you?
Yes.
We got here because voters are not doing our job. The voters of Australia keep voting for Labor or Liberal, thinking they're different. Yep. They're really the same thing. Their policies are almost identical. They differ by degree only. And so what people think is Labor's doing, if Liberals are in government and they want they don't like the government, they say, okay, I'll vote for the other mob, Labor. They get the same thing. This has happened for almost 8 decades now, since 1944. Yeah. So I've handed out how to vote cards. I've been on polling booths, Robbie, and I see people rock up there. Oh, hell, we've got to vote. Oh, I'll just draw some dick and some balls, or I'll write some swear words on it, or whatever,
Yeah.
And then on Monday, they say, bugger me, we've got Labor again. Or bugger me, we've got the Liberal Nationals again. What the hell is going on? Why didn't you make your vote count?
Yeah.
And why don't you vote for the minor parties? Because at the moment, we have got the core problem in this country, in our country, is shoddy governance. It is atrocious. The parliament is stuffed. It's not holding the government accountable. It doesn't matter if it's Labor or Liberal, they're both in cahoots. Not deliberately, but they both follow the same crap. And the media just goes along and parades it. Now, what we need is more independence, because with independence, we can say to the government, no, you don't pass this unless you make sure these people are looked after. And so we have a need for putting the national interest ahead of the party interest. So we need to change the parliament, the makeup of the parliament, who's in it. Instead of being dominated by Labor and Liberal, we need to have a much more open parliament. That comes with the voters doing their job. Voters have been very lazy. Up until I woke up about 10 years ago, I'd always voted Liberal. I voted Labor once, but mostly Liberal. And I was stupid. I can tell you more details about that, but what I started to understand back in 2011 just changed my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you know, how can we get past that mental state of just Labor and Liberal, in your opinion?
Well, I think we have to recognize that the most important lesson I've learned in life is to look within and see what's really being told, what I'm really thinking, why I'm reacting a certain way, why I'm feeling a certain way, why does someone annoy me? Because it all comes from within.
Yeah,
So we need to look within and say, what the hell drives me?
yeah,
And we have to make up our own mind instead of, so it's so infuriating. I said this the other day in the Senate, Robbie, that politicians around the world are despised and certainly not respected.
yeah,
And yet people let politicians run their lives, let the politicians rule their lives. This just doesn't make sense.
yeah,
If I didn't trust you, I wouldn't let you make my decisions for me, but that's exactly what's going on. So we have to work these things out ourselves and put in a bit of effort, but we also need to question why we vote the way we vote. I voted Liberal mainly because my parents voted Liberal and I was brought up in a Liberal hierarchy. So therefore I voted Liberal.
yeah,
Then I started waking up and we got a particularly bad Liberal Prime Minister and I voted Labor. And I realized that was a mess too. So then I started waking up, and then when I started doing my own research, I then realized the whole thing was a mess.
mm,
So it can only come by looking within, finding out why we do the things we do. Why do we vote Labor? Why do we vote Liberal? What is the underlying absurdity? What's the underlying mistruth that drives us to do that? Why do we pick it up from our parents? Because it used to be, saw these figures somewhere, it used to be about 40 years ago that 45% of people would vote Labor, 45% vote Liberal. Every election, some would swing. And so 10% of the population determined who was going to be in power. And then about 20 years later, it was 40%, 20% decided to swing. And now it's around about 35%. And in some areas, Labor's even below 30. So in the Senate last time in Queensland, it was down to 26, 1/4 of the population. So now we've got almost a third of the people voting other than Labor and Liberal. And some elections now we have more people voting other than Labor and Liberal, but they then don't understand how to allocate their preferences, and they inadvertently put a Labor person in or a Liberal person in. We've got to stop this stupidity.
yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Because you're on the inside, how many especially at the moment, how many other politicians and senators are, you know, looking at the same views that you're looking at the moment, and agreeing with all the craziness that's going on?
Most decisions in Parliament are made by politicians who are ignorant, stupid, and gutless. And I don't mean mentally deficient by being stupid. I mean they make stupid decisions. The reality is most of the Liberal and Labor and Nationals members of Parliament and senators do what they're told to do.
Right.
They get into Parliament, they think, and most of them get in there for the right reasons. They're decent people at heart, but they're weak people generally. And so to answer your question, when the majority are weak and gutless and ignorant, then I would say those who know what's going on and who stand up to it, I can count on the fingers of one hand.
Wow.
And it varies from issue to issue. So there are some very good Liberal people. There are some good Labor people, some practical, down-to-earth Labor people. They've usually come up through small business or been employed and themselves, for example, truckies. There are a couple of really good Labor senators who were truckies.
Yeah.
And they're sensible and practical, but they know that if they want to be in the next election, get pre-selected by the Labor Party, they will do what they're told to do. And so we get a few party hacks controlling the whole damn thing. And this is the way foreign agencies take over our country. They don't take it over with a rifle and a jackboot. That's far too obvious. They take it over through Parliament, and they get a few people in the Labor Party and a few people in the Liberal Party and National Party and a few bureaucrats in top positions to just work pushing the same agenda. And so what you'll see is the agenda behind the Greens comes from the UN, straight out. They'll tell you that. What they don't tell you is that the Labor Party takes their agenda from the Greens because the Greens are taking Labor votes. So Labor Party then moves policy towards the Greens to try and keep the votes. And the Liberal Party says we could lose votes here. And so they will start moving towards the Labor Party. So we're all moving to, we're not, but the Labor Liberal parties are moving towards UN policies. And then you have the media, which is largely controlled by a few globalists pushing the same UN agenda. We can talk more about that later, but that's what happens.
Yeah, I was just
So
going
the
to,
majority of people are weak.
yeah, I was just about to say that. I think the media has such a big part in this because, as you said, they're pushing the agenda of the globalists and the cabal, as we call it, you know, and it goes to my next question. Do you think, I don't like saying this, but do you feel that Australia's been sold out and our democracy is nearly dead?
Without a doubt. It's absolutely correct statement you just made. I agree with it completely. Democracy is nearly dead. We will only get good democracy when people start thinking again, and when people start going to independent news sources, independent chat forums like yours. More and more of that is needed because people have got to wake up. They don't realize their livelihood is at stake here, and we can go into that in more detail if you want.
Yeah.
But yes, democracy is almost dead. Free speech, by the way, is not curtailed these days by throwing you in jail if you disagree with the government. It's not a gun put to your head and saying, come on, Robbie, you can't say that anymore.
Yeah.
It's done very subtly. Robbie, if you keep saying that, we're going to call you a racist. We're going to call you an Islamophobe. We're going to call you a homophobe. We're going to call you something else.
Yeah.
And people then shut up. If you dissent on climate change, for example, and most scientists do disagree with the government's rubbish and the Labor Party's rubbish and the Greens' rubbish, most scientists do disagree, but they won't speak up until they retire. So you'll notice most of the skeptic scientists are retired because they lose their tenure. That's one thing. They lose their tenure, they lose their income at university, but also they're labeled as anti-environment. They're labeled as anti-human for standing up. And so they're not game to do that. What's really needed, the most important thing I think in life, apart from love, is to be aware of what's going on inside. Why am I saying the things I'm saying? Why am I driven to do the things I'm doing? Take responsibility for my behavior. But the second most important thing is arguably strength of character. If I disagree with you, I'll tell you, but I won't be scared of telling you. I'll tell you in a way that's respectful and always open to listen to your view. But strength of character means standing up. Most people, Robbie, unfortunately, when push comes to shove, they run away. Or most people say, hell, it's not worth it. Just give me the remote control. The Broncos are about to come on and give me a beer.
Exactly.
That's it. And yet the most important thing in controlling our lives is the government. You know, and here's a figure. I learned some time ago, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, that a person on the average income, which nowadays is about $80,000 a year, spends 68% of his or her income on government. Rates, levies, fees, charges, special taxes, special fees, levies. 68%. Now we're told this crap from when we were really young, that the biggest purchase of your life will be your house. Rubbish. The biggest purchase of your life will be government.
Yeah.
And you think you're getting value for money?
Mm.
If you do, keep voting the way people are voting. If not, then change the way they're voting. It's that simple. Democracy is fundamentally simple, but it means that people must be awake, and that's our call.
Yeah, no, totally 100% agree with you. And again, I thank you for having the guts to stand up and in front of the Australian people and speak your truth, because as you said, there's not many politicians out there that's doing it at the moment, and we need them. We need people like you to stand up for the Australian people.
Thank you, but I find it really easy. I don't know why. My parents told me always to stand up and tell the truth. Sometimes, sometimes in public before going into the Senate, I would feel a little awkward about it.
Yeah.
But if it was when I worked as a coalface miner underground for about 3 years to understand how mining works, I'd be in union meetings, and they'd usually organize it to intimidate people to voting the way the union bosses wanted it. And so I would stand up and put my case. And I found that most people agreed with me. They just didn't have the guts to say it. Yeah. So that encouraged me, but it still feels nervous doing that initially, except in the parliament. I don't know why. You're in front of TV cameras, in front of, so it doesn't bother me in the least to say what I think in parliament. What bothers me sometimes is to be caught out walking the wrong way in a division or something like that,
yeah.
being embarrassed. But but now I'm getting confidence in the parliament. I can start to understand that. So we've all got these frailties. The important thing is to recognize it within us, empathize with ourselves on those feelings of vulnerability, and then get on. But it's really easy for some reason to tell the truth in parliament for me, but not for most people. Partly because I'm sitting close to Senator Pauline Hanson, who's done it all her life, you know. So
Exactly.
she's such a good role model.
She's always been fighting the good fight, as we say. Well, that leads me to at what stage in your life did you start questioning the mainstream narrative, and did you look at the world and go, something's not right here?
Yeah, that politically, Robbie, was about, as I said, around about 2011, yep. 2010, 2011. And I'll go into that in a detail, but it was much earlier when I realized I graduated with a mining engineering degree, an honors degree. And then my father said to me, that means you might be useful. And I agreed with him because I'd worked in the mines underground over the Christmas holidays at uni, so 3 months, right? And I loved it, especially underground. I worked in a couple of surface mines, but mainly underground. I loved it. The team atmosphere, the being on your own with a group of 6 to 12 blokes and just having to work together, the competition, the camaraderie, it was fabulous. But I realized that many of the mines weren't being managed very well. And then I went to America, and I was very lucky. I got a job over there as a mining engineer, and I've never liked engineering as such. I did engineering to get the technical skills and get into management, and I love leading people, and I'll tell you why in a minute, because it's basically setting people free. So in America, I saw 2 of the world's biggest coal mining companies. That's the industry I was in. One was very well managed, and the other was terribly managed. And I started seeing things there, and I realized that people are captives quite often in their workplace. Most people want to work. They love to work. They spend 8, 9, 10 hours a day there. And they want to go home satisfied, but instead, most of them go home with their chins on their chest, just beaten up all day because they're so frustrated. So when I became a mine manager, I would go underground a lot and listen, not to tell people what to do because that takes away their authority and their responsibility, but to listen to them, find out what they needed. That's the key. And it's the same in politics. You'd have to listen to the people we serve. So what I found was that the biggest kick, I remember walking out of a mine one day. When I arrived, that mine was as a manager, when I arrived as a manager, that mine had a strike meeting, a stop work meeting every night. And 18 months later, I thought, I'm feeling good. What is it? And I realized there were record stockpiles of coal behind. The men were getting good bonus for their production. But above all, they would come to work, get changed, go to work, come out after a satisfying job and go home. No hassles, and no dissatisfaction. There was people contributing to a common goal. And what I realized was we'd set people free. When you get free people, they'll do whatever they possibly can. You've got to free up that environment. And I love setting people free. And that's what we've got to do with this government. Stop government in Canberra taking over the country, because that's what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see that every day. The way the politicians in Victoria, New South Wales, and even the Prime Minister, the way they talk to the people, it's like they're talking to a child.
Exactly.
We're adults. We've lived out. There's people out there that's lived their lives and have gone through struggles and everything, and they're talking to them with no respect. And these people are supposed to be the ones that are serving us. We are
exactly,
and it's just, it breaks my heart to see, and everyone just, a lot of people just cowering to that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not right.
No, and the approach from Queensland Premier Palaszczuk is just arrogance. It's patronizing. We had 0 cases yesterday. Good on you, Queensland. What a lot of rubbish.
Yeah.
And then Dan Andrews imposing curfews. Yeah. Curfews. Does the virus only come at night now, does it?
Yeah.
This is absolutely ridiculous. What I've found through my looking within, especially since about 1999, was the first intensive stuff I'd done, was that we're driven by an ego that we fabricate. We make it up. And then the ego does whatever it can to keep itself alive. And when we start melting that ego, life becomes a lot freer. We're no longer captive to ourselves. I realized about 2010, around there, just from doing a lot of intensive work inside and on myself, was that the person who hurts me the most is me, through my value judgments of others, value judgments of myself, through my restrictions on myself. And that's so liberating to understand that. And what happens is the ego becomes very dependent on others. So I can either fight you or I can be dependent on you, but either way, I'm dependent on you. If I'm fighting you, my ego, Malcolm is so good. Malcolm is such a good arguer. Malcolm is taking on Robbie. That's crap. You know, I can debate you with facts and let the facts win. And I don't care if you come up and trump me with better facts. I'll say, hey, you've defeated my argument. Thank you very much. I've learned something. But the human condition is also vulnerable. The majority of people have enormous care, and that's what I've seen in people everywhere, whether it be underground in China, in the back blocks of Hunan province, where they'd never seen a white person before, or in Australia, or in America, or in the middle of New York City. People have enormous care for others, but we can be hijacked very, very easily by people who portray that there's a majority of people differ from our view. We want to belong.
Yeah.
That urge to belong is so strong because our ancestors, our primitive ancestors, I mean, humans are puny. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger beside a tiger is puny, and we get knocked off like that. So what we learned to do was to become social animals, depend on each other, work very well, teamwork. We've got a phenomenal brain that can beat a tiger. So 10 good men, 10 good humans can beat a tiger. That's what we learned. So we feel really vulnerable being outside the group. So what a lot of politicians do is they do two things. First of all, they say, there's fear here, Robbie. This COVID virus is going to eat you up. It's going to kill your granny. And if you don't do this, you will be complicit. So they put fear and guilt on you.
Yeah.
And then what they do is they say, the majority of people will do this. Why aren't you doing it, Robbie?
Yeah.
And if someone speaks up, you cut him down quickly so that Robbie doesn't speak up. And so you've got to belong to the herd because that's ingrained in our DNA. What we also have, fortunately, is a few people will stand up and say, hang on, the herd's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So we need to speak up and get people to realize that they can do something far, far better than listen to these politicians in charge.
Yeah, 100%. If you were prime minister, what would you do to end these ridiculous mandates and rules that we find ourselves in, especially here in Australia? It's just getting worse and worse. What would you do as prime minister?
It's a very easy question, but it's going to take you by surprise, and it's going to be the opposite of what most people think, and I'll explain why. I would immediately gut Canberra, get it back to doing its job. It's taking over everything. I would gut Canberra and prune it right back the way the Constitution was designed, the intent behind the Constitution. And I'd give everything to the states to get on with. And I would probably give them the power to tax.
Yeah.
And here's why. At the moment, we have the federal government raising most of the taxation in income in this country, whether it be GST or income tax or company tax. And then the federal government allocates that using its political and legislated powers. So what happens then is it engages in a bidding contest and it buys votes. And so it sends the money to its marginal seats, and that corrupts the system. If you send the power back to the states, which is where it's designed to be in the Constitution, we haven't changed the Constitution in Canberra, but we have not been complying with it. Now, you're too young to know of Bjelke-Petersen, probably. Joe Bjelke-Petersen was the premier. He was pretty colorful,
Yeah.
very effective. He balanced the budget. He developed the country, developed Queensland. He gave us infrastructure. He cut taxes at state taxes. He got Queensland moving. One of the things he did, Gold Coast was just a little town when he came to power. It was starting to grow. What he did was he abolished death duties, which is taxes that an estate pays. So when you die, you leave your money to whoever you're going to leave it to, but it gets taxed. He abolished death duties in Queensland. So what happened? People from other states, older people from other states, came to Queensland to retire and die.
Mm.
That money came to the Gold Coast and to Queensland. Gold Coast took off. Look at it now. So, and you're a beneficiary of that. So what happened then was the rest of the states, to stop the loss of their elderly citizens and their wealthy citizens, abolished death duties. And that's the way competitive federalism is supposed to work. So if a state comes up with a better way of running its electricity and provides cheaper, more reliable electricity, people move there. If a state wrecks its electricity system like South Australia, people leave there and they take their jobs with them, and they take their companies with them. So what that does is it sends people and money to the states that are run better. At the moment, though, because the federal government controls most things and has the money in many areas, such as some environmental areas, some Aboriginal spending, some education, some hospitals, in many areas, it still has the power to do things, but it has to get the money from Canberra. So there's a complete disconnect. And then if you go to the federal level, it's at the local level, it's even worse. The federal government has the money. The state governments have the power, the authority under the Constitution to do most things. And the local governments, they just have the problems. So at the moment, the federal government spends money in the local area, local government gives them things under certain conditions. So who's really running the local government?
Yeah.
Canberra. Who's running the states? Canberra. And so what you have then is you have a lot of arguing and bickering between states and Canberra. What we need to do is gut Canberra, give the power back to the states. And that sounds counterintuitive to most people, but if you think about it, when the states have more power, they'll have more responsibility, back to where they used to be when Australia was per capita highest income in the world. And then you'd have the states making good, responsible decisions. At the moment, they just blame the federal government and get away with it. And there's so little accountability at the states. So you give the power, and then you say, Berejiklian stuffed up. So the voters in New South Wales will take care of her. Palaszczuk stuffed up. Voters will take care of her. They'll come looking for Dan Andrews at the next election. But at the moment, Dan Andrews and Anastasia Palaszczuk blame Scott Morrison for their woes. They're lying,
Yeah.
but that's what they're doing. And they're getting away with it, and the voters fall for it.
Yeah. Would you ever run for Prime Minister?
Well, the Prime Minister comes from the lower house. He's the leader of the majority. He or she is the leader of the majority in the lower house. I'm in the upper house, the Senate. Right. So I can't do that. The question is, yes, just doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. In terms of the propaganda being, every day we're getting it, if someone has a legitimate reason not to wear a mask, they're labeled anti-maskers. If someone, questions this vaccine and everything that's going on that, they're called anti-vaxxers. If you're a person that doesn't eat healthy, doesn't like to exercise, smokes, drinks, all these things, the media don't call these people anti-healthers. You know what I mean? So
yep, I know exactly what you mean.
Like, what can we do to end this labeling that we see so much now with the agenda that's going on in Australia and the rest of the world?
That's exactly what it is. It is conditioning. So, and as I said a minute ago, they don't put a gun to your head. Sometimes they threaten an academic who disagrees with the climate change narrative and tells the truth and relies on data that he'll lose his job, or they'll cut his funding. That happens. But the majority of people, their control over what people say is indirect and subtle. It's smearing you. It's calling you a racist, calling you an Islamophobe, calling you a homophobe, calling you a climate change denier, calling you an anti-vaxxer. Whenever someone uses a label, they're admitting, they don't know it, but they're admitting they don't have the facts and the argument to beat you.
Yeah.
So if I get, well, I don't do this because it's disrespectful, but if someone calls you a name, then you just turn around and say, well, thank you very much, Robbie. You've just confirmed that you don't have any data or argument to beat me. So thank you for the compliment, you don't let it worry you. So, but it is about conditioning. For example, when I put the mask on, it shows that I'm submitting to the state. It shows that I'm being conditioned to agreeing with the state. Now, the mask, there are some things that are beneficial, and maybe in some circumstances these things are. But listen to the facts on masks. First of all, when COVID first arrived here 18 months ago, there weren't many of these things around. And what did the health authorities tell us? You don't need masks, don't worry about it. They're not necessary anyway. They're no good for you. Oh, really? So when they started pumping them out and they started to condition us, now they're essential. And Malcolm, like everyone else, is thinking, geez, I better wear this thing. Yeah. But every time I see someone in the street with these things on, I just see someone who's being conditioned. Now, I'm a lawmaker in the country, so I will wear the mask in Queensland because it's a directive of the state government. But what I'm doing behind the scenes and publicly is ridiculing the use of masks or the dictates around masks, and also getting the facts on the masks. Here are some more facts. There have been so many contradictions on the mask. I told you about the first one. The second one is you can see the health directives at the state government level are just ludicrous and contradictory. The Queensland government had a lockdown in January, and they put out an edict. Everyone in Queensland will wear masks. They had 3 positive cases in Brisbane. Yeah. People 2,700 kilometres to the north on the tip of Queensland at Bamaga had to wear a mask. Absolute rubbish. And what they're doing is conditioning us. If you look at vaccines, there's a whole range of approaches to vaccines from individuals in Australia. There's what you could call vaccine compliant. They're people who say, give me the jab, I'll go for it straight away. Yeah. Then you've got vaccine reluctant. Yeah, I don't really want it, but I'll take it. Yeah. Then you've got vaccine hesitant. No, I'm hesitating. Then you've got vaccine resistant, really resisting it. Yeah. Then you've got vaccine opponents, don't want it at all. Now, what the opponents do to condition people is to say you're either for it, which is what everyone's for, they make out, which is not true, or you're against it. You're a vaccine anti-vaxxer, which is exactly what you said. It's a derogatory term. Yeah. But if you get people to understand there's a series of attitudes towards vaccines, then each one of those is healthy. If you want to have a vaccine injection, go for it, mate. I don't care. But don't force me to do it.
Exactly.
And then what they're doing is they're ridiculing people who don't agree with them. And then they put in what I call a vaccine prison. You might call it a vaccine passport. Yeah. But it's a vaccine prison. It's locking you out of services, access to facilities. Some people are even talking about, and Macron in France tried this, he had to back down, yeah. Lock you out of supermarkets. So they're depriving you of your food. Some people, Anastasia Palaszczuk, Mark McGowan, are talking about taking away your livelihood, your right to earn a living if you don't get a vaccination. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. Even if you like vaccines, even if you want a vaccine, even if you've got the vaccine, both doses, you've got to fight the compulsory vaccination because it's destroying freedoms. When they do this to you in this area, what's next? Yeah. A person's right to earn a living is fundamental. He's putting food on his table or her table and their family's table. You can't take that away from people. That's an inalienable right.
Exactly.
And that's what they're doing. That is how serious this is getting.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at here, like I live down in Coolangatta, and I've got family in the Tweed, and people can't see. They're told that people can't see your family. What? How can the government tell you who you can and can't see, especially your family? You know what I mean? And then you've got people that have businesses on the other side of the border that they can't get to. It's scary, the times that we're living in.
Well, it's human, Rob. It's inhuman, Robbie. It's inhuman because they think that if they put a soldier in the street, they put the cops knocking on your door, chasing you down because you're in a protest last month, stop you doing this, stop you doing that, stop you earning a livelihood. They think that that's giving you safety. That is absolute rubbish, because what gives us security is having a breadwinner with a job, having a family home that we can depend on and rely on. It's ours. Even if we're paying it off, it's still ours. That we have a loving family around us. We might argue with each other, but we know that when push comes to shove, they'll support us. And the fourth one is being part of and interacting with a community that we interact with, whether it be a social community or a work community. But we love other people and mixing with other people. Very few are loners, but the community is different for each person, but that's the fundamental things. If you've got a breadwinner job, a livelihood, food and shelter, you've got a house for your family to live in, you've got family to support you, and you've got a community around you, you've got security.
Yeah.
What they're doing is the government is taking all of those away, all of them. And that's destroying safety and security. The other thing that's really important is that there are three issues at stake for me. There's people's health. No one's going to argue with that.
Yep.
Then there's freedom. And then there's government accountability. Health at the moment is being destroyed by lockdowns. Short-term health, people are putting off operations. People are putting off going to the doctor. People can't get treatment. So that will pay the bill for that down the road. People will be dying earlier, younger, because things weren't diagnosed. But in addition, we're destroying our economy. And the economy is fundamental for people's mental health now, people's mental health in the future, and people's physical health down the road when we haven't got the money to pay for hospitals and doctors' treatments. Yeah. So health now is coming at the cost of health in the future. But the other thing is, if you look at how far we've come, it's just remarkable. We've taken hundreds of thousands of years to get to where we were in 1850, at the start of the Industrial Revolution. Now look at it around us. In 170 years, we have come. No one alive in 1850 would have believed where we are now.
Yeah.
A king back in the 1800s, a king and queen lived harder lives, shorter lives, less comfortable lives, less secure lives, less healthy lives. And they didn't have the entertainment, the options, the choices we have now. Just 200 years ago, they lived worse than a person on welfare today.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
And that came because people are free to think. So, and it's not just, say I'm incredibly bright and very practical, got a lot of ideas. They might be useful, but it's when I share those ideas, and you might go, wow, Malcolm, that's great. But you will then blow it out of the water with something that you can add to it, different perspective. And next thing you know, you're saving people's lives. You're making work easier. You're making lives easier. You're making lives more enjoyable. I mean, look at this thing. Who would have believed that 20 years ago?
Exactly.
And what it can do. I mean, that came because people were free to create. People were free to innovate. People were free to invent.
Yeah.
But it's only possible if government is accountable for creating the environment in which you work. Government can't give you freedom. If the government tells you it's giving you a freedom to do something, that tells you you're not free.
Yeah.
Because you needed permission to do it. So freedom, we need to strip the federal government of its powers, majority of its powers, hand them back to the states, but above all, hand them back to people and let them get on with their lives. And then you'll find healthier, safer people by far.
Yeah, exactly. What would you say to the Australian people? What can we do to stand all together when we feel like we're all divided at the moment, especially with, social distancing and all this, and it's getting inside the minds of especially the young ones?
I'd say, first of all, think. Above all, think. Don't listen to other people and obey them. Listen to them and think about what they have to say. Talk about it. Talk with others. Get your news from many different sources. Stay away from the legacy media. Don't believe Facebook's restrictions. Look at every post to do with the vaccine or to do with COVID comes with that little tag underneath it on Facebook saying, get your independent fact checking on this, click here and get that. It's rubbish, complete rubbish. They're telling lies and they're suppressing the truth. We know that for a fact. So think about what you do, and above all, start speaking up, start talking to people and honestly share them. Share your ideas and listen to other people, and you'll realize there are a lot more people who think the way we think. Yeah. And above all, vote sensibly. Think about where your vote goes. Apart from loving your family, there's nothing more important than your numbers in the ballot box. Yeah. Think about who you give your numbers to.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got even friends, I've got family that their work have said, no, you cannot come back to work unless you get the vaccine. What would you like to say to those people?
To those people who've been threatened and bullied and intimidated that way, I'd say we've drafted a letter that we'll probably post it on our website. in the very near future, next few days, grab hold of that letter, have a look at it, think about it, and send it to your employer if you want. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I don't give legal advice, but we put lawyers through this work and they've checked our letter, and it's just a draft letter, it's a suggestion. But basically it says this: instead of telling the employer to go to hell, which is what some people want to do, and lose your job,
Yep.
Instead of saying, okay, give me the jab and lose your integrity and lose possibly your health, possibly even die.
Yep.
What we suggest is using this letter and adopting it to your circumstances and saying, Robbie, you're my employer. I will take the jab, providing you can guarantee me that you will indemnify me for any damage or death that it may cause. Providing you can give me these statistics and the data on the jab. Providing you can give me the right that I have fundamentally as an employee in Australia to make an informed choice without coercion. And there are 4 or 5 more conditions. If I was an employer, there's no way in hell I'd sign that letter.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to sack you because for giving me that letter, because you've said once you fulfill these conditions, I'll take the jab. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
See it? See what I mean? The beauty of it is that an employee is saying, I'll take the jab once you fulfill these conditions. And I don't think an employer can fulfill those conditions. The other thing is that state governments can, at the moment, mandate vaccinations. They have got that power, especially 2 of them, Victoria and WA, but the others can enact that legislation if they want. Federal government has no such power. But we know that the federal government has said to the states, you will mandate vaccinations for aged care workers. That's the federal government doing it, but it hasn't got the right to do it.
Yeah.
So what we'd say to people is just look at your employer rather. It may be legal in your contract. For example, your contract might say you will undertake any medications that the employer gives you. Have a look at your contract. But even if that is in your contract, contact our office in a few days and ask for a copy of the letter. Talk to your MP, send him emails, send him or her emails, letters, phone calls. Get up and really make a stir about it, because it's your health that's at stake. It's and these vaccines, if a state government has the right and the lawful right to be able to mandate a vaccine, that doesn't make it ethical. Yeah. It's unethical to do it. It may be lawful, but it's unethical. So if you think about it, I've asked questions in Senate estimates of the Chief Medical Officer, the head of the Therapeutic Goods Administration who approved these vaccines. And by the way, these COVID vaccines are not approved. They're provisionally approved.
Exactly.
The health minister himself has said, the world is engaged in the largest clinical vaccination trial. I'll say it again. The health minister, Greg Hunt, has said, the world is engaged in the largest clinical vaccination trial. Robbie, I'm no lab rat, and neither are you.
Me neither.
People of Australia aren't either.
Exactly.
So what I asked these people questions was, can you guarantee the safety of these vaccines? No. Can you tell me the dose that we need? No. Can you tell me how many shots we'll be getting? No. Can you tell me how far apart they'll be? No. These are the top of the game in the country. Can you tell me if restrictions will be lifted? Mask, social distancing, other restrictions will be lifted if we get a vaccine? No. Can you tell me if lockdowns will be over? No. So what the hell are we doing vaccinating people?
Exactly.
And I need to make it very, very clear. I wholeheartedly support medicines that have been tested and proven to be safe, effective, and preferably affordable. I am totally opposed, and I'll work as a senator. I'll continue working. We've been working from the start opposing this. I will oppose untested medicines being put on people. I'll oppose untested medicines being forced upon people under threat of losing their livelihood. That is immoral. And so that's my position on any medicine. Test it, prove it safe, prove it effective, and prove it affordable. Now, the vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine has already found that their efficacy, their efficiency, their effectiveness rather, is plummeting. It's down to around 39% of what they thought it was already within just a couple of months after giving people their vaccines. What's the point?
Yeah.
The second thing is that some people argue that the vaccines will lower your chances of death if you have a vaccine and you get COVID. Okay, so it's your choice. But they also admit that the vaccinated people still transmit the virus. So if I choose to not be vaccinated, that's my choice about my health. It will not affect you getting the virus, because what we're seeing now is that vaccinated people transmit the virus just as much as unvaccinated people.
Yep.
So don't give me this crap that I'm jeopardizing other people, that I'm selfish. That's rubbish. So these vaccines, Pfizer, for example, is now admitting publicly that its vaccine is not, it doesn't have the efficacy within a very short time after giving the jab. It's now admitting that it's going to the United States Food and Drug Administration for authorization to give a third booster shot. They don't know what the hell they're doing. Now, Pfizer in particular, I know a few figures about Pfizer. It was reported that in the last quarter, 3 months, they earned $18.9 billion. One company, 18.9 billion. The Wall Street Journal, which is renowned for its estimates being accurate, has estimated that given the margins on Pfizer's products, Pfizer in the last 3 months made a profit of $4 billion. Pfizer recently, the Therapeutic Goods Administration in this country recently approved Pfizer's drug for combating myocarditis. Myocarditis has been recognized by the some medical agency in Europe, overseeing the whole of Europe, that its vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, can cause myocarditis. So the Pfizer vaccine can make you sick, and then you can buy a Pfizer drug to cure you. So it's making money two ways. The AstraZeneca vaccine is now known to cause blood clots. Pfizer has a drug recently approved to treat blood clots, and its profits went up 13%. So you think those blood clots are really rare?
Yeah.
I wonder. You look at Alphabet, which is the company that owns Google and YouTube. Alphabet also owns 12% of Vaccitech. Vaccitech makes the vaccine AstraZeneca. Ivermectin is a drug that's proven, it's safe, it's affordable. It would stop this virus like that. It's already doing that in some countries overseas. But if someone mentions ivermectin on YouTube, they get banned. It's happened to me. It's happened to Craig Kelly. It's happened to him on Facebook. So what we've got is Alphabet, which owns Google and YouTube, owns part of a vaccine maker, Vaccitech, and they're shutting down debate and opposition. We've also got a corrupt government, I believe, because we know that ivermectin has been on the market now for around 6 decades. It's been given in 3.7 billion doses around the world for known conditions, and it's been proven safe, effective on those conditions, and affordable. I took ivermectin when I came back from India because I had picked up something over there, and that cured me. I had no side effects.
Yeah.
So ivermectin is proven safe. So the next question is, does ivermectin work with COVID? And because it's a safe drug. So what we're finding now overseas, India, parts in Asia, some countries in Asia, some countries in South America, some countries in Europe, are using ivermectin very, very successfully. It's not only stopping the virus, it's not only curing the virus, it's preventing you getting the virus.
Wow.
But our government won't use it. Our government is threatening doctors if they use it. That's immoral. That's costing lives in this country. If we had ivermectin, people could just take these pills. We've got some in home, by the way, right here. I've got some here. Some doctors are prescribing it, and I've got it in case one of our members of the family gets COVID. In case I get it. Yeah. I'm not that worried about it because I'm fairly healthy. But the fact is, we've got ivermectin. Why can't you get ivermectin?
Yeah.
Why can't everyone get ivermectin? Because it would open the borders. It would open everything. It would stop lockdowns, stop masks, stop all this crap.
Yeah, exactly. And stop the agenda.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for saying that. That's a really important point. Going to, I've got family overseas. A lot of people got family, that are stuck overseas. I can't wait to try. I've spent my whole 20s traveling the world and exploring and growing myself and everything. I really feel for the young ones that have just finished school, and had inspirations to travel and everything. And we're stuck in a jail here in this beautiful country. It's a beautiful country of ours, yes, but it feels like a jail at the moment. In your vision, when do you see Australia being liberated again, so we can travel and explore this beautiful world of ours?
If we can get our dopey politicians and bureaucrats to wake up and start approving ivermectin for use with COVID instead of threatening doctors. I got a letter, by the way, from the Therapeutic Goods Administration threatening me for advertising ivermectin when all I was doing was telling my constituents. That's all I was doing. And my job, Robbie, is to inform constituents. It's to listen to constituents. It's to answer questions to constituents. Constituents ask me a question about ivermectin. I'm going to tell them what I found.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor. I tell them that, but I'm going to pass on what I have. Now I get a threatening letter from the government. Fortunately, I told them, hey, I'm not doing that. Go to hell. And they didn't come back. But the point is that what we've got to do is, if we get ivermectin up, then it will end this like that. And it'll keep people safe. It'll keep the older people safe.
Yeah.
The second thing is that we will end this once people hold governments accountable for their stupidity. Lockdowns are absolutely ridiculous. I'll go on to that in a minute if you like.
Yeah.
And then once see, at the moment, what's happened is politicians have used fear. Palaszczuk did it with her election. The West Australian Premier McGowan did it with his election. The Northern Territory Minister, Chief Minister, did it with his election. They got the people terrified. And then they said, and when you get a population terrified, the incumbent government is usually the winner because that's what they know.
Yeah.
And so the machine up here in the Labor Party in Queensland spread the fear, exaggerated the fear, ramped it up and said, Anna will keep you safe.
Yeah.
And she got returned. If that election, in the state election, had been held in February rather than in November, she would have been out.
Yeah.
But once COVID came, she was safe. So what we've got to do is not worry about the next election. Start telling your MPs now. Start telling them you've had enough of these lockdowns. Go to protest meetings. Stick within the law, but go to protest meetings. Just make your voice heard. Share with each other. Get your alternative sources. Get informed so that you can speak up strongly. Tell your family members. And if they say you're an anti-vaxxer or you're a racist or an Islamophobe or whatever, don't worry about it. Just get the facts first, then you can speak confidently. That's when it will end. What happens in this country is people put pressure on governments, the governments change.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, you talked about lockdowns there too. Back in March last year, 2020, on Monday, the 23rd of March, I've always remembered this date. It was the first single day sitting of the Senate, Robbie. And that was to pass through emergency legislation, right, for job seeker. And then on the Wednesday, the 8th of April, we had another single day session in Canberra, and we passed the JobKeeper legislation. Now, the government, we could see before those two dates, we could see coronavirus was starting to come into the country. And we saw the tens of thousands of people dying in Italy, France, Spain, China, and we could see the devastation. We now know that some of those deaths are exaggerated, but let's just accept that that's the position everyone was in before, which is correct. We were terrified of what was going on. So when a government gets attacked like that, or when a country gets attacked like that, it's our duty to say, you're the elected government, Scott Morrison, get on with the job. Here's all the money you need, get on with it. But I said to them on both March last year and April, we'll give you the money, we'll just wave it through, but we'll expect you to come up with the data. We'll expect you to come up with a comprehensive plan for managing this, and we will hold you accountable. Now in May, I started holding them accountable, but we continued throughout the year. And in Senate estimates this year in March and April, I asked a key question. The government has still not given us the data. So I asked the Chief Medical Officer for the data around COVID. COVID, transmissibility is high, it means it's contagious. But its impact, its severity, its mortality whether or not it'll kill you, is low to moderate. It's less than some severe flus in the past.
Yeah.
So what that tells us is that we don't use these particular circumstances that the government has used, these strategies. So when I realized that, and we also know that it hurts the aged more. It hurts the people who've got some, what I call them, comorbidities. So when you understand that, you then have a stratified plan. You plan to keep some people in quarantine. You don't lock down everyone. You keep the vulnerable quarantined and you keep the sick quarantined. So I also checked with the chief medical officer and the secretary for health in Senate estimates, where we get to ask them questions. I said, now look, we're not seeing a plan, but tell me if these things are good strategies for a plan for managing the virus. Lockdowns, number one. Number two, testing, tracing, and quarantining. Number three is some restrictions like masks and social distancing. Number four, vaccines. Number five, I said antivirals, like ivermectin. Number six, they added personal behavior. What do you mean by that? Washing hands, that kind of thing. Number seven, health and fitness, because obesity, people who are obese are more vulnerable to the virus. So I said, is there anything missing from my list? No. Is there anything that's on the list that shouldn't be there? No. So these are the 7 strategies for managing a virus properly. Yes. Have you seen a plan with those 7 strategies? I haven't. No. There isn't one. Now, if you go to lockdowns, for example, that's all the states are using, the Australian states. If you look around, the World Health Organization, which is a UN body pushing an agenda, it enabled the virus to get a jump on us because it suppressed what was going on in China. The World Health Organization is dishonest, incompetent, and crooked. We know that. But even the World Health Organization says that lockdowns are a blunt instrument that are used initially to get control of a virus and then not used again. They said you use it to get control of the virus. So every time a state government uses a lockdown, it's admitting that it hasn't got control of the virus. And that's bloody clear. So instead of us managing the virus, because we're not using those 7 strategies, the virus is managing us. We get one case, Northern Territory gets locked down. We get one case in Victoria, Melbourne gets locked down. We get just a handful of cases in Sydney, Sydney gets locked down. Still in lockdown 2 months later. Millions of people, 8.5 million in New South Wales, locked down. Absolutely ridiculous. Even the World Health Organization. Now, if you want to go further in lockdowns, the United States has 50 states. Some of them use lockdowns, some of them don't. There's no difference in performance among those states. Florida, where Governor DeSantis is the governor, he had a lockdown early on with this COVID. And very soon after that, he realized it was wrong. He removed the lockdown and he apologized to the people of Florida and said he will never do it again, and he hasn't. Yeah. Florida is a large state, high population. Same as California is similar, it's got high population. California has been in almost perpetual lockdown. California is performing far worse than Florida. And Florida is known to have a very high proportion of retired elderly people. That's where they go to retire. Yeah. The 2 Dakotas, North Dakota and South Dakota, one of them uses lockdown, the other one doesn't. There's no difference in their performance. Lockdowns don't work. They destroy the economy, the future economic health of the country, the future physical health of the country. They cause enormous mental health problems, and they don't do any good. Yeah. I mean, that's proven. So we've got 7 strategies, the government at the state level using lockdowns, which are seen as not effective. And we've got the federal government using vaccines, which are not proven and are still provisionally approved. They haven't been tested fully. Haven't been tested on reproduction systems, haven't been tested on intergenerational effects, haven't been tested long-term for effects on the person who gets the jab. Yet they're using that and they're ignoring a very successful, proven, safe, affordable treatment in ivermectin. This is insane. It's dishonest. It's inhuman. And yet these are the people that keep getting voted in. This is the government has blood on its hands by denying people ivermectin. Ivermectin could stop this like that.
Yeah, I think after all this is done, and hopefully the majority of Australians in the world wake up, there needs to be Nuremberg trials with everything that's going on at the moment.
There need to be trials for sure. I won't call them Nuremberg trials, but we need to hold people accountable. But again, that's Parliament's duty.
Yeah.
The fact that government, see, if you run a business, you have a plan before you spend money.
Yeah.
This government has blown hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Put our budget, put our debt at near close to $1 trillion. And it still has not got the data. Sorry, it has the data, it's not using it.
Yeah.
It still hasn't built a proper plan. If you're a business, you don't spend money unless you have a plan. You don't spend money unless you have an objective. You can see that the states and the federal government don't have a plan because they're all heading in different directions. They're blaming each other when they should be just modifying their plan and telling people what they're doing. They're not.
Yeah.
Because they haven't got a damn plan. That's fundamental. That's incompetence. It's dishonesty. It's deceit.
Yeah.
It's fraud.
Yeah, exactly. This show's about wisdom and learning and stuff. What's the biggest lesson that you've learned in your life so far?
The person who hurts me the most is me. Until I started waking up to what my ego is doing, and an ego isn't just about bragging. That's not what I'm talking about when I talk about ego. What I mean by ego is the belief that Malcolm is what matters. It's not, because as you started started our show this evening, you mentioned we're two cosmic spirits together. Well, I believe we're one spirit, and we share that. Now I'm still got a body, but Malcolm is not this body, if you know what I mean. Malcolm is a bundle of thoughts and my concept.
Yeah.
And I might not like you because you're an immigrant. Well, so am I. I was born overseas too, but you know what I mean? I put value judgments around things, or I say, I don't like you because you've got a beard, or I don't like you because you're wearing a white shirt. I mean, this is bloody stupid.
Yeah.
But that's what happens in our society. I don't like you because you've got darker skin or lighter skin, or you're fat, or you're short, or you're tall, or you're skinny, or you're male, or you're female, or homosexual, heterosexual. It doesn't matter, all that stuff. So what I've learned is that the person who put the most hurt on me was me, by making judgments about myself and judgments about other people. And that's what I'm learning, to be free, and really free in life. We not only have to have laws that don't impact on people's freedoms, but we have to have freedom within ourselves.
Yeah.
Freedom to realize that you can call me all kinds of abusive things, but it doesn't really affect me.
Yeah.
Freedom to stand up and say what I think. That's real freedom. Yeah. So that's the most important lesson I've learned in life.
So well said. I love it. What messages of hope would you, because we're in pretty dark times at the moment, and everyone's glued into the mainstream media and television and everything, and it's very dark around. What messages of hope would you like to give to the Australian people and the world as well?
The number one thing I would say is that humans, I've got enormous respect for humans. I'm very, very pro-human, positive about humans.
Yeah.
We've had our Hitlers, we've had our Stalins, we've had our Morrisons, I'm not putting them in the same category, but we've had our failures and Palaszczuk and so on. We've had our disappointments. We've had governments that are not serving us. But humans are wonderful people. When they're corrupted in a corrupt system, or a broken system like the Parliament at the moment, then it drives incorrect and inefficient behaviors. It drives inferior behaviors. It drives hurtful behaviors. It drives enormous waste, mismanagement, and pain. But the people themselves are generally pretty decent. So a lot of politicians are stuck with huge egos. A politician, I believe, any good leader should have the strength of character, that's number one, to be able to say, Robbie, I don't know. Can you explain what you mean by that, please? I'm sorry, I don't know the answer. Or Robbie, I made a mistake. I apologize. Or Robbie, I don't know. Can you please tell me where I can get the information? Politicians don't do that. Most politicians. That's the number one thing. So I want to say, above all, humans care, but the systems drive counterproductive behaviors. Now, when you look at Australia in particular, so I've always got hope, because it might get far worse before it gets turned around, but it'll eventually get turned around. It's how much damage it does before it gets turned around. Australians are educated. they're very egalitarian in the sense that they give each other a fair go.
Yeah.
They're very cooperative. They're very caring. They're intelligent. So they're great people. And we've got a good education system, but it's being wrecked. So our kids aren't getting the same education, as good an education as we got on the basics. The second thing is we're blessed with wonderful resources. Our soils are good. We've got plenty of agricultural land. We've got, we're now the world's biggest exporters of hydrocarbons, oil, natural gas, coal, those fuels. We're the biggest exporter of hydrocarbon fuels now. We have got huge metal resources, iron ore and other metals. We've got wonderful soils, as I've said. We've got a wonderful climate. We can grow things around the whole year. 100 days, 365 days of the year, we can grow some crops. We're close to a massive market in Asia, which is hungry to grow. So they need our food, they need our raw materials, need our minerals and energy. We're blessed with this. So what the hell are we doing? Exporting it all without processing it. We have destroyed our country. We've now got coal that's the best in the world for making electricity. It's the best in the world for making steel. We make barely any steel here. We send our coal overseas to China and other places. We import the steel back and it's not as good as we could make it. We send our coal to China where they generate electricity and sell it for 8 cents a kilowatt hour. We use our same coal, the best coal in the world, to generate electricity here at 25 cents a kilowatt hour, 3 times the price. Why? Because we're subsidizing these stupid renewables that are just inefficient and destroying jobs. I could talk for half an hour on those things, but the point is we are destroying our country, but we've got the resources, we've got the people, we've got the climate. We're just so blessed. What we've got, the one problem we've got right now is the same thing that's running all the way through this show, absolutely shoddy governance. So the hope I give people is that we were #1 in the world in the 1900s, 1920s, per capita income in the world, the highest average income in the world. We're now plummeting down. At one time we could make all of our metalworking tools, we could make cars, we could make tanks, we could make aircraft. We don't do that anymore. It's not because we haven't got the resources and the people, it's because we're so poorly led. And the reason we're poorly led is that our parliament has sold out to the United Nations policies. And I could talk about them for half an hour. I've got a list in front of me, but we're selling our sovereignty, we're selling our independence. We're now dependent on other countries for even some food products.
Yeah.
We're dependent on other countries for manufactured goods, vital manufactured goods, some of the technology. We've got some of the brightest people in the world, some of the most inventive people, some of the most entrepreneurial people, but they're throttled back by government. So what we've got to do is unshackle the government in this country and start getting it back to serving the people. One of the things that I've made a habit of is that every speech in the Senate that I've ever given, I start with the words, "As a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia." When I first got into the Senate, the Labor Party and the Liberal Party used to laugh at me. That's fundamental. I'm elected by you guys, but I serve you guys. I'm elected to serve you, not the party. And that's what Pauline does. She serves the country. She does what's in the national interest. The Liberal and Labor Party serve the party to grow their party. That's what we've got to do. We've got to change away from parties. So we've got to change. People have to take responsibility for their vote. Instead of voting for a party, vote for the person, vote for the policies. Think about what's going on. Take responsibility because we've got the people, we've got the resources, we've got the climate. Let's get on with it.
So well said. So
Thank
well
you.
said. Oh, God. Thank you so much for again standing up for the Australian people and I like to call it being a truth warrior. You're a truth warrior, and you should be proud of yourself.
Thank you very much. I love the job I'm doing, serving people of Australia and people of Queensland. So we just got to get more people from outside Labor and Liberal and Nationals into the Parliament, so that more of us can do our job for you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
And I want to express my appreciation to you, Robbie, because we've got to get more people speaking up, more people putting their views out there, sharing views. They don't get me on the Sky because I don't go with the propaganda. They don't get me into the ABC because they don't go with the propaganda. They don't go put me on Fairfax, or what's left of Fairfax, in Nine Network and the Nine papers, because we go against the narrative. We go against the UN agenda. We go against what the government is pumping out, all the crap they're pumping out. So we don't get a voice, because the same people that control the parties control the media.
Exactly.
And they don't like people like me speaking up. So it's very important for you to keep doing what you're doing. So anybody who's watching, make sure you subscribe.
Thank you so much for saying that. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why I started this, because I look at the mainstream media and these so-called journalists are not doing their job. They're not asking the right questions. They're not even questioning. They're just, you know, being told what to say to the people of Australia and the world. And I've always thought it's wrong. And I thought, you know, I'm going to make my own stand and get people like you on to speak the truth.
Thank you. You know, just an example of that. If you look at the Weekend Australian, it's very high circulation in this country, very high sales on the weekends. And in the last couple of months, there've been a number of 4-page supplements, lift-out supplements, color, pushing the vaccine, pushing the vaccine, pushing the vaccine.
Yeah.
That's all it does. That would have been paid for.
Yeah. Exactly.
You and me as taxpayers would have paid for that to brainwash other people, because the facts are just not there to sustain what they're doing. So please continue doing what you're doing. We're happy to support you. And if you want to talk about the UN one day, that'll open up people's eyes.
I'd love to get you back on the show, Malcolm.
Oh, we're happy to be here.
And then talk about it. Thank you so much for what a great conversation. That was amazing. I am Roberto Roya from the Mystic Drop. You've just been listening to Senator Malcolm Roberts. Again, thank you so much, Senator, and thank you for all you're doing.
You're welcome. It's a real pleasure to serve you, Robbie.
Thank you so much.